All right, today I want to talk to you a little bit about salt and light and the essentials, as being essentials to evangelism. Brother Danny and Brother Reese have spoken recently, and there seems to have been, through all the teachings that have taken place in the last few months, seems to be driving a message about being who we should be and doing what we should do and throwing all the rest of it aside. And as I listened to the recent messages, and listened to Brother Reese last week and talking about evangelism, that's something that I've noticed as well, that something that's rarely spoke about in this walk, if you want to call it that, this stage of our faith. And as he mentioned, there is great purpose, need, and validity in the teachings of the Torah, because after all, if you're a believer, we should be following and doing things that are pleasing to our Heavenly Father. But we have oftentimes tend to replace those works with the message of the gospel. And today I want to talk about and kind of springboard off of the message that Brother Reese brought last week about evangelism, and talk about that a little bit more, following along the same lines of these men have been preaching for some time now in regards to being who we should be and doing what we should do. Because evangelism does have its place, sharing the gospel. But there are ways to do it, and there are ways not to do it. And I'm going to share with you a few insights, hopefully, that you can take home with you today, that hopefully will just continue to build your library into your personal library in your heart, that guides you into the way you should live each and every day. I'll ask you, if you would, I'm just going to do 4 verses, but in honor of reading Yahweh's Word, I ask that you'd stand in reverence to the reading of His Word as we begin. And this is from Matthew 5:13 through 16. And it says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it gives light to all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." You may be seated. Father, today the prayer is simple. I pray the blessing of the preaching of your word, that it would resonate deep in our hearts. Give us wisdom to live out the Great Commission, to go and evangelize and baptize and to teach everyone to obey all that you've commanded. Forgive us where we fail. Father, help us today. Help us to grow in the likeness of Yeshua. Help us to be transformed into His image day by day. I pray and ask this in Yeshua's name. Amen. I want to follow up with reading to you the similar parallel account, I guess you'd say, in Mark 9:50. Salt is good, but if the salt has lost its saltiness, wherewith will you season it? Have salt in yourselves and peace with one another. Luke 14, verses 26 through 35 read, "If any man come to me and hate not his father, his mother, his wife, his children, brethren, sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whosoever doth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you intending to build a tower doesn't sit down first and count the cost, whether he has sufficient to finish it? Lest haply after he've laid the foundation is not able to finish, and all that behold it begin to mock, saying, This man began to build, but he wasn't able to finish. Or what king, going to make war against another king, sitteth not down first and consulteth whether he be able with 10,000 to meet him that cometh against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends an ambassador and desires conditions of peace. So likewise, whoever he be of you that forsaketh not all that he has, cannot be my disciple. Salt is good, but if the salt has lost its savor, wherewith shall it be seasoned? It is neither fit for the land, nor yet for the dunghill, but men cast it out. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. In these passages of Scripture, with the backdrop of evangelism in mind, Yeshua tells us that we're to be the salt of the earth. To say a man, a little bit of kind of historical information, to say a man is salt of the earth was to speak highly of him. In the ancient world, salt was a precious commodity. Greeks actually called salt divine. Roman soldiers were at times paid in salt. Hence the word salary, from the Latin word sale. The salarium paid to Roman soldiers has defined a form of work for hire, if you will, and gave rise to such expression. And I know this is not a common statement now, but I know old-timers will recognize this about a man being worth one salt. Anybody ever heard that around here? Man being worth one salt. Romans regarded salt as a symbol of purity. This adds force to the words of Yeshua. Why? For two primary reasons. Number one, salt is a preservative. Remember, there was no refrigeration in those days. Meat would spoil quickly. To preserve meat, it is salted down in order to save it from corruption and decay. We still see that. If any of you follow television reality shows like the show Alone or whatever, they don't use salt because they don't have it. But what they'll use instead is they'll use smoke as a way to preserve meat. But salt, you would salt the meat down and it would save it from decay. We might say that believers, Christians if you will, are to be a preserving agent in society. Christians must live in the world's environment but not become a part of it. As an effective preservative, Christians are not of the world, but rather in the world, as Yeshua said. Number two, salt adds flavor to food. In other words, Christians are to give flavor to life in a metaphorical sense. The life of kingdom citizens should reflect the very joys of life. Many self-identified believers misunderstand, thinking that they must show piety or godliness or zeal or devotion by an attitude that appears to suck the flavor out of life rather than put it in. We have those who are the hoity-toities, the holier-than-thous that look down the bridge of their nose in condemnation of others. An appearance to look holy Then again, we have others who think that somehow walking in holiness in the presence of the Lord is to look and act and carry ourselves like a hobo or a gypsy or a pauper, walking in sadness with our head hung low. This is in great contrast to what the Scriptures teach of how believers should carry themselves as a loving neighbor. The one who reaches out a hand to help the poor, to feed the hungry, to lift up the cast down. There was a woman who was once asked why she didn't or couldn't, why she didn't become or would not become a Christian. And her reply was, "I'm sad enough as it is." Because of the way we act or misconceive, the world believes that Christianity is insipid. To define that word insipid means tasteless, flat, or dull. Some sects of Christianity, denominations, or individuals still teach such a thing. It's amazing that some of the things that are taught as being Christian are far from what the Bible describes and how a believer should look and act. Nevertheless, Yeshua warns that salt may lose its savor. Anyone tell me or offer a definition for savor? I heard somebody speak. What? Savor. Savor. S-A-V-O-R with an S, yes. S-A-V-O-R. Says, so, savor, enjoy. Interestingly enough, this is a unique word and how it's translated. This word is Strong's Greek word 3471. He says, if salt loses its savor. This is the Greek word 3471, pronounced moreno. It's kind of where we get our word moron. It's not a joke. I'm being serious. It's used 5 times in the New Testament, and its primary definition means to act like a fool, to act foolish. Cross-reference to that, of the 5 times it is defined and translated as foolish, only 2 times, here in Matthew 5:13 and in Luke 14:34, do we find it translated as savor. The other times in Romans 1:22 and 2 times in 1 Corinthians 1:20, it's translated as foolish. If salt loses its savor, now its secondary definition can mean dull, flat, or tasteless, but its primary definition is that of foolishness, or one who acts or plays a part or acts like a fool. Moron. Moreno. It loses its strength. Verse 13. A little bit of history. Palestinian custom was to put salt under their ovens to enable them to maintain heat. Over time, the heat would produce a chemical change in the salt that made it incapable of retaining heat. In other words, it lost its usefulness. So then, It was thrown out into the streets to be trampled over. Kind of reminds you of what Yeshua said. It's cast out to be trodden underfoot. This may very well have been the image and the thought when Yeshua taught this parable. What's the point? Christians are to ever be mindful not to lose their savor, not to lose their usefulness pertaining to the Great Commission. We can, and many seem to have, lost usefulness by being sucked into many different things, including attitudes of bitterness, self-righteousness, and fruitless debates over some fruity doctrines, or fruitless doctrines. Here's a case of lost opportunity. After all, what did Yeshua teach in another parable? Talents that are not used will be lost or taken away. Many of us, and I'm not preaching to you, I'm preaching as Reese said, I believe it was him or it may have been Danny, said I'm preaching to me as much as I am to you. But many of us, through sin, poor attitude, or simple idleness, instead of being a preservative and giving meaning or flavor to life, we receive scorn, mockery, and rejection, and many of us would say, oh, I've had some of that. But many will receive scorn, mockery, and rejection as the world tramples over us toward corruption, despair, and loss. Why? Because sadly, all too often, our rejection is not because of the cross that we carry. But the rejection that we receive and we suffer are rather often self-inflicted wounds because of the way that we represent our King. You may bear all kinds of truth. But I heard a man once say, you can serve the best steak in the world, but nobody will eat it if it's on a dirty plate. And today I want to offer one. You know, Danny has done it, so I don't want to fall wayside to the tradition, but I'm going to offer a free one for Reese. For you today. Reese, you made a true statement. As you quoted Danny, when you said you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And that may be true. If you've never dealt with a horse, you have no idea the strength in comparison to what you possess, and you're not going to make him do anything. But I'll tell you one thing that you can do. If you want that horse to drink water, pour the salt to him. You feed him plenty of salt, and he'll find water. If you don't believe that, how many of you have ever eaten old timers what they call pickled corn? My wife's like, oh, well, I'd never eat it until I met my wife. If you never eat pickled corn, you've not lived. But I will tell you this right now, I'll make you one promise. If you sit down with me before a quart jar of pickled corn, and by the time that we can eat through half of it, you'll be begging me for something to drink. Water, water. You can lead that horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But one thing you can do to him is you can pour the salt to him. And he'll beg you for something to drink. Yeshua also said that we're to be the light of the world. John 8:12 says that, then spake Yeshua unto them, saying, I am the light of the world, and he that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. John 12:46 says, I am come a light into the world, and whosoever believeth on me should not abide in darkness. Again, John 9:5 says, as long as I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. But in Matthew 5, he says, you, and me, as followers, are the light of the world. In other words, in order to be effective in evangelism, Yeshua said, here's the way you do it. You do it like I do it. You be like me. Now, there's a stark difference between us being the light of the world and Yeshua being the light of the world. And how is because he is light. The Christian receives, or the believer receives light from him. It's not something that we do within ourselves. Luke 11, 33 through 36 says, no man, when he hath lighted a candle, puts it under a secret place, neither under a bushel, but on a candlestick. Some of your translations may say he doesn't put it under a couch, but puts it on a mantle. And those are fine too. Same difference. And they that which come in may, so that they which come in may see the light. We must get a grip on the fact that if we're not reflecting the light of Yeshua, we then are in turn casting shade on his name. And the last time I read, we shall not take Yahweh's name in vain. And I grew up the same way all of you did, that contained God's name in a 4-letter word. But that's far from what that verse means. It literally means to bring his name to naught. Like so sadly many had done that drove the woman to make this statement. I won't become a Christian because I'm sad enough already. It's really elementary. It's cause and effect. Those of you who hadn't seen it, we'll probably show it again here before long. Andy Andrews' video called The Butterfly Effect. This is pertinent to all of us. Everything that we do, everything that we say, our behavior and our actions have an effect. As I've said so many times, maybe from this podium, I don't remember, but in the world, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Everything that we do has an effect on somebody. If you claim to be a believer and you act like a heathen, that's a problem because you're going to negatively affect others. Your efforts in evangelism will be in vain if you don't practice what you preach. And if you preach one thing and you do another, it proves that you are a liar. Because people do what they believe and they believe what they do. Young people, listen to me. You're in a valuable place in your life right now that everything that you say and do can affect you for the rest of your life. Everything that you... How would you feel? You, by the way, I'm lucky to have lived as long as I have. I asked my mom, I've tried to kill myself a bunch of times on accident and didn't have enough sense to be able to do it. I've tried to wreck four-wheelers and motorcycles and dirt bikes, street bikes. I've tried to blow myself up. My wife can tell you that. I couldn't even pull that off. But my point is, there's no guarantee that you're going to live a long life. And I will tell you right now, think and ponder on your life right now that if God calls you home and you have to give an answer for your life, what will you say? And what will be his reply? It matters because what you do reflects what's in your heart. And that can go both ways. You can claim to be a believer, live like a heathen, Or you can be all righteous and pious and act like you've got it all figured out, like the way you live is going to earn your keep, and neither one of those work. A man told me one time that about talking about Yeshua when he said the road that leads to life is narrow. And he said on each side of that narrow way is a ditch. One of them is hyper grace, easy believism. The other one's legalism. And he said both of those ditches are as deep as hell. I've never forgot that. Everyone in here, everyone must constantly reevaluate our life, look at ourselves, search out our hearts. Yeshua said, let your light shine. In the Greek, the word shine is in the imperative tense. In other words, it's not a suggestion, it's a command. Shining is not a choice or recommendation, it's an obligation. We must light the way. Also, the word so, let your light so shine. In the Greek, in the syntax, the word so, that we translate as the word so, is the first word in the sentence, making it emphatic. So shine. Yeshua is saying that kingdom citizens are to live in such a way that they attract men, not deter men. And we live in a world that so many people, how many of you in here, just asking, and this is not a rhetorical question, how many of you have been hurt in church? Hurt, H-U-R-T. Pardon my Appalachian accent. Hurt, H-U-R-T. How many of you have witnessed gross hypocrisy in the church? Hands go up everywhere. If you don't believe there's hypocrisy in Christianity, wait till sundown tonight, go out to eat, and ask your waiter what their worst day, the day that they hate to wait tables is. They'll tell you. I've never had any one of them tell me a different story. It's always Sunday. And I'm telling you right now, I believe that you should tip accordingly, and I believe sometimes there's a waiter that needs to receive a message if they're horrible service. But I'll tell you, if they give you good service, we should be generous people, because if we bear the name of Yeshua, and so many people in the world that claim to, that are greedy, tight-fisted, impatient, and rude, claiming the name of Yeshua, we need to send a different message to them. Yeshua says we should attract men. Now, we shouldn't attract men to us, but rather he says, let your light so shine that they may glorify your Father which is in heaven. There should be so much flavor in your life that you carry so much salt and so much light that people want to know what you have that they don't. Now, there will be people who will reject it, and there's nothing you can do. Don't get all high and mighty on that, because Yeshua said straight up, don't get too excited, because before they hated you, they hated me. But we got to be really careful when we receive rejection and ridicule, mockery. Let's take a real close look and self-reflect and say, is it because of the cross I'm carrying? Or is it the way I'm presenting the message? Not just in verbiage, in the words that we use, but in the life we live. I've said it before, I'll say it again. There's one particular man who had a tremendous influence on my life. I didn't even know he was a preacher. He never even told me. But there was something about his life that was different than other people. And I recognized that. And it was after I announced my call to ministry that I found that out. And then I invited him to come to my ordination. He preached the gospel to me without saying a word. Hypocrites can shine outward goodness that will attract or the applause or the approval of men. But the Christian should, the believer, and I'm sorry if the word Christian offends you, I'm sorry, but I don't apologize. Because by definition, I'm a follower of the Messiah of the Bible. And therefore, I am a Christian. If you don't like that, sorry. But I don't apologize. Contrary to some of the nonsense that people try to preach on social media, Constantine didn't invent Christianity. Unless Paul's letters were wrote after Constantine, who were first called Christians in Antioch. But Christians should shine. When I say Christians, I'm talking about the Messiah of the Bible. I'm not talking about the old down greasy grace version of Jesus that's not biblical. I'm talking about the one that's in the book. But Christians should shine with such beauty that men will recognize that he is reflecting a light that is far more greater than what's in him. Talking about the man shining it. Christians should shine with such beauty that men will recognize that he is reflecting a light from something greater or someone greater than himself. Thus, they'll glorify the Father which is in heaven. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 4:6, "For God who hath commanded the light to shine out of darkness has shined in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Messiah Yeshua." And that word "in" means through or by the means of the face of Messiah Yeshua or Jesus the Christ. Ephesians 5. I'm going to read 11 verses. It says, "Be ye therefore followers of God as dear children, and walk in love as Christ also has loved us and has given himself for us an offering and a sacrifice to God for a sweet smelling savor. But fornication," which is any kind of illicit physical intimacy, I'm trying to be careful for small ears, "and all uncleanness," which is Greek word 167, by the way. These are the things that we're not supposed to be. He says, "For fornication and all uncleanness," which is Greek 167, which means physical or moral impurity, "or covetousness, let it not be once named among you as becomes saints." In other words, saints this should not even be mentioned once among the saints as being participants of. "Neither filthiness," now that word is Greek 151, which means obscenity, "nor foolish talking, nor jesting." That's Greek word 2160, which is scurrility, which means derogatory claims or remarks referring to others that are intended to tear down because they're, in other words, it's like gossip. And also ribaldry or irreverent behavior or speech, which are not convenient. And that word's Greek 433, which means unfitting or not proper, but rather giving of thanks. In other words, focus on the good. Focus on doing what is good and honorable and pleasant. Verse 5, "For this you know, that no whoremonger," I'm reading King James language, "whoremonger, nor unclean," which means immoral person, "nor covetous man who is an idolater." Did you hear that? Refers to a covetous man who is, and that word means which or that is an idolater. If you're a covetous person, you are committing idolatry. He says, none of them hath any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Let no man deceive you with vain words to teach you otherwise. For because of these things cometh the wrath of God upon the children of disobedience. Be not ye therefore partakers with them, for you were at one time in darkness, but now you're the light of the world. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness and righteousness and truth. And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. John 3:17-21 says, For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. He that believeth on him is condemned not, but he that believeth not is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of Elohim, of the Son of God. And this is the condemnation, that light is come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone that does evil hates light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. And I'm going to translate that. The Basic Bible in English reads that verse this way. The light is hated by everyone whose acts are evil, and he does not come to the light for the fear that his acts will be seen. But he that doth truth comes to the light, that his deeds may be made manifest, that they are wrought in or by or from or through God. It's amazing sometimes when you have answered prayers that happen in a moment. Because something come to my mind when I was doing this, and I wasn't really sure if it was just my mind that was thinking this up, or if I was feeling led to speak on these verses of Scripture. And I got my confirmation when Warren done his feast lesson. James chapter 3. Verse 12 reads, Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries? Can a vine bear figs? So can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh. In context, in James 3, that category in your Bible probably talks something about in the head. If you've got one that's got headings over areas in the chapters, will say something about the tongue or speech, wise speech. My brethren, be not many masters, knowing that you shall receive greater condemnation. Translated out, it means not many people should be teachers because they're going to receive a stricter judgment. The way it's translated in other translations. For in many things we offend all, but if any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able to bridle the whole body. Behold, we put bits in horses' mouths, so that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. Behold also ships, which though they be so great, they are driven of force winds, yet they are turned about with a very small helm or a rudder. Wheresoever the governor listeth. In other words, wherever that captain turns that rudder, that's the way the boat goes. He says, even so the tongue is a little member that boasts great things. Behold how great a matter a little fire kindles. And Brother Warren done a great job helping kids understand about how the use of the tongue is life and death. How we can use our tongue for good or we can use our tongue for evil. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and is set on fire by hell. And then he goes on to say, James says, we tame all kinds of animals, birds, beast of burden, what we call beast of burden, which will be cattle, ox, donkey, horses. He said, we tame all of them, but we can't manage to tame the tongue. He says, wherewith we bless God, even the Father, and wherewith we therefore curse men, which are made after the similitude of God. They are made in the image of God. Out of the same mouth proceeds blessings and cursings. My brethren, these things ought not to be. Does a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter water, or fresh water and salt water? And then the verse I've already quoted. Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries, either a vine figs? So can no fountain both yield salt and fresh water. This reminds me a lot about Yeshua's words. By the fruit, you'll know them. Philippians 2:15-16 says, that ye may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God without rebuke, in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom ye shine as lights in the world, holding forth the word of life, that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I have not run in vain, neither labored in vain. This is Paul writing to the Philippians. If you belong to the family of Yahweh, the world is to or must see Yeshua's light in us. And we should bring the flavor of true life to this dying world. People, there are two ways to do this that we can really, really mess this up. We can do it in acting like a hypocrite, or we can do it by presenting it in a very irreverent way. It don't take you but just a minute, especially you get on the world of social media, to see the way that people who claim to believe are presenting what they're calling truth to the world in a very condemning manner. We must be careful about the things that come out of our mouth. They not only have to be true, but they have to be kind, they have to be seasoned with grace, and flooded with love. We should preach the truth in love. And so many people, it's sad that so many people don't. And it creates so much confusion. I know so many people who have given up, quote unquote, religion altogether because of the chaos. We need to keep the main thing the main thing. We need to focus hard on being a light and making sure our salt tastes good. Last verse of John 11:10 says, but if a man walks in the light, but if a man walks in the night, my eyes are going away. But if a man walks in the night, he stumbles because there's no light in him. Recapping this in very simple terms, salt preserves. Salt gives taste. It gives flavor to the world. Light points the way through darkness, enabling to warn the traveler of dangers. Light does not remove darkness by physical force. Light does not remove darkness by physical force. It simply shines, and darkness flees. Light cannot be hidden. There's no such thing as a secret disciple. If you are or have been lit, you will shine. I've never tried to go camping and light a lantern and not produce light unless the mantle was broken. Something was wrong, or otherwise it would give light. And that brings me to my final, and I'm listening. And people, I'm telling you, I know it's common, and I stand by this statement. That I grew up in church my whole life, and I probably heard about 8 messages preached 40,000 different ways, and every one of them at the end were salvation messages, and I agree that we should preach them. Evangelistic messages, invoking people to dedicate their life to Yeshua. But I know that there were many times where I sat in there thinking, I've already done that. Tell me what I'm supposed to do. And that's where evangelism and preaching the word go hand in hand. Because once your lamp's been lit, it has to be dialed in. Because if you don't dial in an oil lamp, what happens? 1, it don't produce much light. 2, it goes out. Or 3, it soots up the whole room, makes everything a mess. There's a place for evangelistic message that should happen all the time, as well as in the confines of the congregation and where instruction are given on how to live once we become a believer. And I believe that we preach evangelism and I'm thankful that Reese brought it up. Danny's talked about it. I'm thankful for those things, and I agree with them a whole 100%. And finding that balance is key, but we tend to do one or the other. That seems to be the way we do. That's people. I come into this walk thinking, man, finally found the people. Finally found the way. And it took me several years to realize the problem. Humans. Because we're all messed up. But I say this because there's very much potential that there's somebody under the sound of my voice in this room, or somebody, and definitely somebody listening online, that are either not believers yet or have falsely convinced themselves that they are. And I'm here to tell you right now, especially talking to you young people, if you don't shine, you need to seriously examine yourself to see if your candle's ever even been lit. It is extremely important that if you hear through a heart of conviction, if you hear God speaking to you, calling on you, answer it today. As we'll soon come to understand with more clarity in a couple of weeks, probably within a few weeks, we're going to start the Experiencing God Bible study. This Wednesday, we got our books. Praise Yahweh, He overabundantly supplied. They were late. We had to wait a week. And then the ones that got lost showed up too. So now we got plenty of books. What's that? Yeah. That's when we catch you cheating off of Karis's book, and then I'm going to give you a new one and make you start over. But if Yahweh's speaking to you, now is the time that He expects you to move. Not tomorrow, today. As Paul writes, for today is the day of salvation. Think really hard about that statement. And think really hard about that grim reality that there's coming a day that you and I all will meet. Because it's appointed to every man wants to die, and then there's judgment. The question boils down to is, Have you made yourself ready to meet him? Because you can get hung up in all kinds of doctrines about what happens to you after you die, till Yeshua comes back, or all these different fringe things that make no difference. You can have all the prophecy figured out when you think he's coming back, when you think this, that, or the other is going to happen. But there was a story in the Bible that Yeshua told too about a guy like that. He had so many riches, he didn't know what to do. So what am I going to do? I'm going to build bigger barns. I'm going to put it up, and I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry. And Yeshua said, you fool. You fool. For today your soul is required of you. Whose will those things be? There's no promise that we have for tomorrow. We may not make it out of this parking lot alive today. That's a grim reality that we better come to grips with. And we lose sight of that until we lose somebody in our life. Guys, they're coming to every one of us, young and old alike, that we are going to meet our Maker. We are going to meet our Maker, and it may not be today, might be tomorrow, might be next year, but the fact is you don't know. And young people, listen. You're in the vital moments of your life, especially you adolescents that are coming up in teenage years. You're at a vital, crucial point in your life. Get your life in tune with God. Make a resolve in your heart to what you're going to do. And trust in him to transform your life. To not be conformed to this world, but transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may be molded into the image of Yeshua. You'll never make it fully, but it is certainly a work that should be taking place in your life day by day. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you, and Yahweh bless you.